it was a huge risk because I was leaving my job as a lawyer. I had practiced for several years. I started out in the Minnesota Attorney General's office, being an assistant attorney general for the state.
That's like serious.
Yeah, and then I went to private practice for a little while, and just didn't feel like it was a fulfilling career path for me. So I took a major risk, and we drafted a great business plan. We pounded the pavement for funding for about 9 months, and we got 30-some private investors and a bank interested in funding us.
Hey, I'm Matt Osterman, and welcome to Propellant, Minnesota. Today's episode is a good one as we have Matt Schwandt in our studio. He is the co-founder and president of Bauhaus Brew Labs in Northeast Minneapolis. For those that don't know, Bauhaus is not only one of my personal favorite breweries and tap rooms, but they're an internationally recognized brewery with numerous World Beer Cup awards in their trophy case. In our conversation, we discussed taking big career risks, innovation in a changing market, empowering collaborators, and the importance of minding details. This episode will appeal to both beer drinkers and non-drinkers alike, particularly because Matt is sober himself, and we go into depth on his leadership developing new non-alcoholic, THC, and functional beverages. He has tons of advice that I think is applicable to every industry or endeavor, and I certainly learned a lot in this episode. Please enjoy my conversation with Matt Schwandt. Half the quotes attributed to Benjamin Franklin are often not from him, but he has one that is something like, "Beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy."
I've heard that one.
Yeah, it's a good one. Do you find that to be true in general, and is that kind of why you got into the brewing business?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that beer and just enjoying beverages together has always been the way that people socialize and celebrate. And that's really the foundation of our brand at Bauhaus is celebration. In fact, if you go into the tap room, you'll see this kind of crazy German word that looks really challenging to pronounce because it is, and it's Gemütlichkeit. And I'm probably not even saying it right. I do my best. But it roughly translates to celebrating the fruits of our labors together as a community. And it's typically associated with like end of summer, getting into Oktoberfest season and harvest time. And that was really the core philosophy for our brand was let's create something that people can celebrate. That really was the culmination of years of, crazy obsessive home brewing and learning about craft beer. I actually started when I was living in Nashville as a musician. And I was working at a brew pub in undergrad called Bosco's. It's not there anymore, sadly, because it was a great place. They had awesome wood fire pizzas, and they had a brewery that was on the second level of the place, separated by a window pane so you could see into the brewery if you were a patron. It was a really cool vibe.
And this was Nashville, 15, 20 years ago? So it's
yes.
A little different than the Nashville
Yeah,
today.
A little different than today. A lot of bachelorette parties today. There was still that back then, but it's been built up even a little more.
And you kind of started Bauhaus with family, right? Can you
Yes.
tell a little bit about that? Because that can go both ways sometimes.
Yeah, we're a true family-owned and operated business. I had the idea that we would create sort of like something inspired by Shell's Brewing, one of the oldest breweries, family-owned breweries in the country, here in New Ulm, Minnesota. And so we wanted to create sort of a modern family-owned brewery. So my then wife and I, my two younger brothers, my two sisters-in-law, my father-in-law, who was my brewing partner for 10 years, we had this idea to start a craft brewery that was a little bit different than what was going on at the time in Minnesota with craft beer. We wanted to bring lager styles back in vogue. Most of the breweries around here were doing ales, hoppy ales in particular. We wanted to focus on Minnesota's heritage as one of the best lager brewing states in the country. That was certainly true pre-Prohibition. I think it's still true today. We brew a lot of great lager beer in Minnesota. But that was our central focus, and that was our differentiating factor with the beer. We also wanted to be different, though, in how we approached our brand visuals and the tap room space itself. It was very colorful, very bold, very iconic, inspired, of course, by the Bauhaus Design School, which itself has so many iconic and bold designs.
Yeah, a lot to pull from that.
A lot to pull from. But what we were really after, more than the design aesthetic, was the philosophy of the people who founded the Bauhaus, whose central tenet was that work, play, and celebration should all be intertwined. And we were like, wow, what a cool philosophy to create from. So we co-opted that and put it into our craft beer brand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Before the business launched, can you tell us kind of how that came together? Because, that's a big risk. You probably had to pull in some capital and find the space, Yeah. Can you give us a little bit on those early days?
And we found this really iconic space in Northeast Minneapolis. Great place to be if you're a craft brewery. And the reason we got it was actually there was a towing company who had our building and they failed to exercise an option on their lease.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the landlord knew we were looking for a space, contacted us and said, hey, I think I have a building for you. And as soon as we saw it, we knew this is the space. This is too cool to pass up.
Yeah. It's a dope spot for sure. Yeah. And what was the scene, kind of the craft brewing scene locally at that time?
Yeah. I would say that there had probably been, one wave of breweries, like newer breweries like Surly, Fulton, Indeed. And we were kind of part of the second wave. Fair State, Insight, a handful of others that came to market around that same time.
Yep.
But we had the benefit of learning from those who went first. We had the gift of going second.
Surly probably did a lot of work.
Absolutely. Yeah. Omar Ansari really paved the way for craft beer as we know it in Minnesota today, particularly with his advocacy for passing the taproom law.
Yep.
Because that was not a thing until 2011.
Yep.
And that really is what allowed so many breweries to come to market, because with taprooms, we were able to capture the kind of margin that you need to sustain a business like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and, we saw, locally kind of the taproom explosion too, where it seemed like there's a new one opening up, every month.
Yeah.
And I think, us, beer drinkers were concerned, like, is this a bubble? Is this, and it never really came. Some have come and some have gone, of course, right? Like any business or industry, but it's kind of matured and seems like it's in a good spot. Were you nervous at all during, those heady days when there were tons opening all the time?
Absolutely. Yeah. It became highly competitive very quickly. We had a couple of great first years, and we were riding high. We were like, oh, this is amazing. This is great. We're exceeding, we're exceeding our projections. This is great. And then so much competition entered the marketplace, and the game changed. It became a lot more challenging to get shelf space, to get draft lines. And then of course, the pandemic didn't help, but we survived. But you're right. I mean, there are closings occurring now, and it's not, I don't like the word bubble in this context. We've seen what bubble looks like, at the end of the 90s with the dot-com bubble bursting. That's not what this is. This is, like you said, a market maturing. There's healthy competition in the marketplace. And that makes it more challenging, but that doesn't mean it's a bubble. There's just... it's a mature, competitive market.
And good for the consumer.
And it's good for the consumer, absolutely.
Because you're forced to innovate and provide more value, right? And kind of all the other, you have to adapt or die, basically.
That's the name of the game. Yeah, and right now we're having to do a lot of adapting because the market's changing very rapidly. Yeah,
so let's get into that a little bit. I know your Bauhaus was, pioneering kind of in the NA space and the THC space. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of, looking around the corner, you guys saw like, hey, we need to, pivot here or add some additional, versatility, I guess?
Yeah, I'll back up a little bit and I'll tell you why we got into the NA space when we did, because we were earlier than a lot of others. In the fall of 2017, I was diagnosed with a condition called acute pancreatitis. And I was hospitalized for several days. I had excruciating abdominal pain. I didn't even know what that condition was, which made it a little scary.
Yeah, I bet, yeah.
The doctor said, though, fortunately, the condition was completely within my control. The only thing I needed to do was cut alcohol out of my life.
And you're like, do you know what I do?
Yeah, that was my reaction exactly. I said, well, this is my livelihood. This is my passion. What am I supposed to do now? So there was a lot of challenging years ahead for me. I'm totally comfortable with it now, and I see it as a net benefit to my life. I mean, I have wholly embraced sobriety and the ripple effects that it's had on my life overall. But that made it a lot more interesting to me to explore NA beer. And so in 2019, a friend of mine named Ben Jordan, who founded a company in St. Paul called ABV Technology that de-alcoholizes craft beer, like on a small scale, and creates a really nice NA beer. He asked if we would be interested in trialing some product with him. And I said, yeah, this sounds pretty intriguing. And as someone who doesn't drink, that it sounds extra interesting.
Right.
And we were really surprised at how good the product tasted, even on a trial run. And so that's really how our NA brand came about. And NA, N-A-H, that was just my standard response when I stopped drinking, when people asked me if I wanted to drink. No, I'm good.
Yeah, it's a really fun, branding idea, play on words.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's how it started, but there really wasn't a market for craft NA beer at the time. We were just doing something that we thought was fun.
And there was O'Doul's and maybe a few other
Sure.
NA, larger.
From the mass producers,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yep, but nothing really on a craft scale. I mean, this was before athletic was even a thing. And over the years, it's steadily grown. It's not a huge part of what we do, but it's steadily grown. And it's the only SKU that's done that for us in our 10-year history, consistent growth. Now it's really exciting because that market is heating up nationwide. I mean, globally even.
Yeah.
It's become a pretty prevalent thing in Europe. But we're seeing numbers tick up double digits every year in the NA space here in the U.S.
Yeah, well, it seems like especially the younger generations are, kind of moving away from the alcoholic beverages and moving into the NA and some other beverages.
That's exactly right.
You've seen that and felt that?
Yes, yeah. That's what the market research tells us, is that Gen Z is just not as interested in alcohol. I don't know if exactly what that is due to. Perhaps it's that they see the negative outcomes, health outcomes, or today when your mistakes are always so visible and highly publicized and sometimes fueled by alcohol. Maybe they don't want to dip into that.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point because, had social media existed when I was in high school or college,
would we have done a lot of the things that we did?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's probably going to be some sociology papers and theses written about that stuff if there's not already. Yeah, that's actually really fascinating to think that the internet and social media maybe has, impacted some drinking habits.
I think it certainly has to some degree. I'm not a social scientist or anything like that,
Yeah.
but I think that anecdotally there's probably truth to that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, alcohol abuse is a thing, right? And it's probably a healthy correction.
Yeah.
For that. And
I think it's a net good for society personally.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the tap room itself, you guys provide a lot more value than just, people getting together to drink alcohol, right?
Right.
There's food trucks and there's music, and I think you guys do comedy shows. You want to tell us a little bit about the thought process and, kind of, I know the space is well designed to hold crowds, but yeah, did you know you're going to do that right away when you started? Was that already part of the baked in the DNA?
Yes, actually it was. This was one of our differentiating factors, is that not only did we want to be a place for celebration, we wanted to be very inclusive, not just of our customers, but also the content that we were going to feature in the tap room. My family and I are all musicians by background. A lot of our employees are too. They're artists, they're creators, and so we wanted to be content creators as much as we wanted to be a craft beer brand. So from the beginning, we were like, we want this to be a music hub. We want to do art shows. We want to do comedy. So yeah, that was part of the deal from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. We touched on it a little bit, but can you kind of tell us about the Minnesota beer scene? How is it looking right now? Who's out there doing great work that you really, you enjoy, kind of what they're pushing and how they're going about their business? Can I just give us the quick, elevator?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the brands that started strong are still around. Surly, Indeed, Fulton, Bauhaus, Fair State. A lot of those brands are still going. We're having to pivot quite a bit though, because there is more market pressure. And consumer behavior is changing a bit, like we talked about, less alcohol consumption, people looking for new types of beverages, especially non-alcoholic. Here in Minnesota, we have THC beverages. A Also, functional non-alcoholic beverages are on the rise, and we're actually developing a line of those as well.
What does that mean?
With functional ingredients, ingredients like adaptogens, nootropics, functional mushrooms,
sure,
things like that. Alcohol replacement type beverages. But as far as breweries that I think are doing really exciting things, I think Forgotten Star in Fridley is actually doing really exciting stuff as far as their event programming.
Yeah.
They're really bringing something new to the taproom experience. They've got curling rinks. They're about to launch a permanent food truck. They have multiple events every week in the taproom, and it's a big, spacious, beautiful taproom. It's great. I think St. Paul Brewing is doing some really interesting stuff. Since it was acquired by Can Wonderland.
Yep.
That patio space is gorgeous in the summer. There's just so much life there. It's a fun place to gather and celebrate. Those are two standouts for me. But, I think also Fair State has been really innovative in what they do, getting in on the THC beverage trend pretty early on, too.
Let's talk about the THC seltzer and beverage space. So can you kind of go back in time a little bit and talk about, how that came to be and with the legalization of because it's hemp derived, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Can you give us a little background on that?
So in July of 2022, the Minnesota legislature amended the definition of hemp to mirror the federal definition, which was modified in the 2018 Farm Bill. And I follow this pretty closely because I'm a lawyer and I geek out about stuff like that. But that amendment made it possible for Minnesota food manufacturers and beverage manufacturers to include small amounts of hemp-derived THC in edible products. Not too long after that, of course, the legislature took up a full recreational legalization bill. And at the beginning, when that bill was first announced and the language was released, it would have prevented the breweries from continuing to do what they were doing, which would have been very bad news because the market was getting really soft on craft beer, and this was like a very rare opportunity to get some of that back.
Right.
So I was pretty strong in my advocacy for the brewery side of that, and I testified in 3 congressional committees voicing our concerns about the language. And I was very pleasantly surprised that the bill gave us virtually everything we asked for. I was very happy with how Zach Stevenson, in particular, the representative who authored HF 100, was very responsive to our asks and realized that it was perhaps even an existential thing for breweries. I mean, we just come out of COVID. This was, like I said, a rare opportunity for us to get some market share back in a new and innovative beverage space. And we wanted it to continue, especially because it was the legislature, after all, who created this space.
Right.
And they made good on it. So, of course, the Office of Cannabis Management is not fully operational and up and running. There's going to be some licensing hurdles, and we presume inspections and things like that. But we're also already operating in a controlled, regulated space. So
right.
That's kind of just part of the business.
You're set up to follow those.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when the full legalization takes effect, does the hemp-derived THC go away, and then you're working with the standard marijuana, or
no, it doesn't, and actually we don't want it to, because if we had to deal in full marijuana, it's federally illegal, obviously,
right?
And that raises a whole bunch of concerns with banking and tax rules.
You can't have a bank, probably. It's difficult.
It's difficult. You would have to go through a community bank, or a bank that operates only within the borders of Minnesota, that's willing to take on the risk. But more important than that, there's an IRS rule that says if you deal in an illegal transaction, you cannot deduct any ordinary and necessary business expenses.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a problem.
That's a big problem. Not just related to the transactions concerning marijuana, but for anything in your business. So that's a non-starter.
Yeah.
So that was actually the most critical change that we needed to see in that bill from the time it was introduced to the time it was passed.
Yeah. And the hemp-derived, people seem to be happy with that
It's
product.
The same molecule.
Yeah.
It's a legal distinction only.
Right.
The function is the same.
Yeah. And how has that variety been doing business-wise?
Been doing great for us. It's grown steadily. we're actually innovating in that space. We're about to release, I think, one of the very first non-alcoholic beers with THC in it in a few weeks. And our THC line is called Tetra.
Yep.
And we're calling this Tetra Highbrow, BRAW.
Yeah, that's great.
So we're putting out a cream ale with hemp-derived THC in it, and we'd like to explore other styles if the market responds well to it. So we'll see.
Yeah, I remember there was a bunch of conversation and confusion around like serving alcohol and THC beverages to the same person in a tap room. Like, what happened with that?
That's still the rule.
Okay.
Yeah, we are not allowed to allow people to commingle drinks like that. Presumably because of the compounding effects of alcohol and THC, which
probably valid. I guess
it's valid.
Yeah.
We don't want people driving, and or becoming too impaired, and so we don't allow people to mix. Now there is a rule that I think is very impractical and perhaps even unenforceable or unworkable that says service staff has to ask customers if they've had one or the other within 5 hours. I don't know how you could rely on someone to be truthful about that.
Right.
So I've heard everything from maybe creating a wristband system. But even then, especially in Northeast, you think about how walkable the breweries are to one another.
Yeah.
Let's say someone goes to Indeed and has a pint over there and then comes to Bauhaus and then has a THC beverage. It's really an honor code thing. And it's, like I said, kind of unenforceable, unworkable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, common sense rules apply too, right?
Right.
If somebody's looking intoxicated, obviously,
yes,
you guys have to.
And that's the rule anyway.
Right.
If our service staff sees anybody that's visibly intoxicated, they don't get served.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because it's so early within this process. A lot of people are still trying to figure it out, and there's some fear, right, of what's going to happen, and we see this happening across the country with other states, and I think most of the rollouts have been pretty good, but people can be pretty polemic with it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably the result of decades of misinformation about THC.
Well, hemp, too.
And hemp, too.
Hemp was, it's kind of a miracle plant, and it was, kind of categorized as a federally, I don't know the term for it, you probably would, but it really kneecapped that industry from expanding.
Right.
And then that farm bill kind of unlocked the doors a little bit.
Yeah.
And I know Minnesota is benefiting from the hemp industry in general,
Yeah.
not just on the THC side. So it's kind of been a huge net positive, I think, for a lot of folks.
That's how I see it. Yeah, definitely. And, the rollouts in places that were early movers like that, like Colorado and Washington State, if you look at the research and the studies, there has not been some explosion of traffic accidents or, net harms that have come out of it. In fact, it's the opposite.
Yeah. Well, it's funny if you look at like human productivity, and I'll tell you my story. I get hangovers. I just do. But when I have a THC beverage, wake up feeling great.
Right.
So I feel like from like hours gained back in my life, it's a huge positive for me, and I still enjoy a few beers every now and then. But some days, if I have something important I have to do the next day, have one or two of those, and you don't deal with the repercussions the next day. Yeah. Everyone's different, but that's my story.
Yeah. I don't really use THC. I have. I just choose not to. Now I'm just 100% substance free.
Yeah.
But I know people who derive a lot of medical benefits from it.
Yeah.
I know people in the neurodivergent community benefit from it quite a bit.
Yep.
People with chronic pain.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see, how this evolves and develops. Yeah, you got a front row seat, so be fun to watch. Totally. We know Bauhaus products are on store shelves all around the state, and maybe beyond. I don't know. Can you tell a little bit about the challenges of going to retail, and in terms of like percentages, how much business is that for you guys?
Sure. Yeah. Well, retail is the biggest challenge for a craft brewery because the margins are so slim. Unless you are a self-distributing brewery, which Minnesota allows breweries to do, thankfully, and we started out as a self-distributing brewery, then you capture a bigger margin. But when you partner with a beer distributor, you part with about 30% of your margin.
That's significant.
It's significant. And unless your brand grows considerably to offset that margin take, it's very challenging to make money in distribution. So that's been the biggest challenge for us, because we did partner with a beer distributor in the end of 2016. And that was right about the same time when all sorts of new breweries came to market, made it a lot more challenging to grow on the retail shelf and on-premise in bars and restaurants. But we do have a fairly big market presence, especially here in the Twin Cities, at bars, restaurants, liquor stores. And we just entered the Colorado market this week.
Oh, really?
Believe it or not.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. We partnered with a distributor there called Best Craft. They operate in the Front Range territory, so basically everything east of the mountains. But even some of the mountain areas, especially the ski resorts. So that's going to be an interesting new market for us. We see a lot of opportunities with the NA beverages and other new markets. And Colorado, interestingly, despite its history as being a first mover in craft beer and having some of the most breweries per capita in the country, is also like one of the top 5 fastest growing states for NA beer. So maybe that's a little bit of a bellwether for what's to come.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, they have quite a long legacy of beer brewing there too, right? So,
exactly.
Yeah, that's fascinating. On the retail side, distributors take their margin, but can they help you get on the shelves as well? Is that part of the deal?
Yes. They have all the relationships at the distributors or at the distribution points. They've got a team of sales reps that supports our sales reps and vice versa. So it is a partnership.
And a retailer, might not want to work with an individual brewery because of, who knows? There's a big pain in the ass factor probably. But if you're dealing with the distributor who has, a couple dozen, then it's one point of contact. And I would imagine that's easier to say yes, or at least trial or experiment.
Yeah. The challenge there is trying to get the distributor to keep you front of mind. When they're making that sale. Yeah.
So do you think having, being stocked on shelves helps drive business to the tap room then too? Do they kind of work together?
I think so.
Or is it the other way around?
I think it probably goes both ways, to be honest. Our tap room has been a strong performer for us from the beginning. We have seen a noticeable decline though in taproom traffic since about end of last September. I don't know if that's due to maybe some economic fears. We're kind of in flux right now. No one really knows when consumer prices are going to go back down, if ever. Rents are high. Wage stagnation. There's a lot of factors involved. Or maybe it's just people choosing to drink less and go out or spend their dollars elsewhere. Hopefully we'll see a rebound this spring and summer. Particularly as we diversify our offerings and let people know, hey, we've got plenty for everybody. All walks of life. We just want to create a community hub that people feel comfortable in.
Yeah. Well, is that kind of your existential fear that people just kind of get bored with craft beer?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. That is our bread and butter. It's still the vast majority of what we do. So we feel it when people, choose to drink another kind of beverage or go somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, and Northeast too, for the folks familiar with it, is, changing quite a bit. I don't think it's a Nashville 2.0 anytime soon, but, a lot of fancy apartment buildings and like that. You would expect that more people living in the area might lead to, more foot traffic, but maybe it's not the right demographic.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a good question. My thought initially was, we're going to see a huge increase in foot traffic. This is great. And, for the last 4 or 5 months, we haven't seen that. That's not to say that it couldn't come. But we're seeing a downward trend right now. And I've spoken to a lot of our owners in the area and they're seeing similar things. So I don't know. It's a small comfort, I guess, but it's not ultimately very comforting at the end of the day.
Yeah. All right. What is the World Beer Cup, and why is Bauhaus so good at winning awards there?
The World Beer Cup is the biggest beer competition in the world, as you might imagine from the name of it.
You could call it World Beer Cup, and maybe just be a tri-state area or something, right?
You could.
But this is literally the world.
It is, and it happens every 2 years. It's not an every year thing. But it is a competition that's sanctioned by the National Brewers Association, which is based in Boulder, Colorado. So, the Great American Beer Festival, that happens every year. This is like I said, a competition that's every other year. So it's a little more prestigious because it is a worldwide competition. You're going against breweries like, for example, in Germany, who have been producing beer for centuries.
Crazy, yeah.
And we've been fortunate enough to win 2 awards since we opened, which we were thrilled by. So one of which we received last May when I was in Nashville for the Craft Brewers Conference. And this is how silly it was. We didn't think we were going to win anything. You know, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I need to like just be more optimistic.
Right.
Put better vibes out in the universe.
But you submitted it. And
yeah.
You're like, all right, whatever.
And we didn't even attend the ceremony. We were in our hotel room watching the live feed on YouTube, and they called our name, and we were just like, oh my gosh, like, we better get down there. So we did, and we got our award, and it was for a fruited American sour ale that we put in our mixed pack for last spring. It was called Deck Jockey. It was a passion fruit berry sour ale, and it was delicious.
It's delicious. I love it.
Yeah. So we were thrilled by that. And then the previous time we won was for our flagship Pilsner Wonder Stuff, which
also
is
great.
Still around.
Yep.
Still our top seller. Hopefully always will, because it's a fantastic beer.
Yeah. Let's get into the weeds a little bit about brewing. Let's I guess make it simple for the listeners and viewers. What goes into that process? Like how did you start? I mean, you were doing the home brewing stuff, right?
I was.
And then does it just get bigger from there? Is that essentially
more or less? Yeah. I started brewing kits that you buy off the shelf at like
Mr. Beer.
Yeah, things like that.
Yeah.
So actually, I'll back up. When I was working at that brew pub in Nashville, there was a Nashville homebrewers club that would meet there about once a month and share brews. And occasionally our brewmaster, he was a Munich degreed born brewmaster named Fred Scheer. He used to talk to the homebrew club and give them tips and talk about beer. And it was just like a geek out. It was great. But I always thought in the back of my mind, like, there's no way these guys are making good beer at home.
Right.
Well, fast forward to 2005 when I moved back to the Twin Cities. I was going to a cousin's wedding in Wisconsin, and we passed this random homebrew shop, and curiosity got the better of me, and I stopped there, and I just started looking at equipment, and I was just like, I need a new hobby.
Right.
Let's try this out. So I bought a kit, I tried it, and surprisingly, it was pretty good.
Well, do you remember what the beer was?
It was a brown ale. Okay. Something that's relatively forgiving, straightforward, and I really enjoyed it. And from there, I didn't even do any more kits. I just started creating my own recipes, and I was reading a ton about it. I like to research. I'm a nerd like that. So I just got anything I could get my hands on and read it and learned how to formulate my own recipes, what different malts do, what different hops do, different yeasts, water profiles. For the next 10 years, I just kind of stepped up incrementally. I built myself a pretty nice homebrew system that I had fabricated for me by a local fabricator. It had like pumps and burners and
oh wow,
yeah, it was kind of a big deal. And actually, we still use it as our pilot system at Bauhaus.
Funny,
but it was about halfway through that journey that I really started focusing in on German lager styles. They're challenging to brew, which I enjoyed. I like a challenge. But I also found them just so rewarding and refreshing from a taste profile. I mean, there's a reason those beers have stood the test of time. They're phenomenal. So that was really how I got my start in sort of the nerdery of brewing.
Well, it seems like even with, your legal background, like you care about the details.
Right.
And that, I think, is probably important in brewing.
I think that's what sets, any company apart. Is how focused are they on doing the little bit extra that really takes them maybe from good to great.
And how has your legal background helped the business? I would imagine immensely so.
Yes.
Any stories or anything on that front?
Well, I mean, very much so. Having worked for the government as a lawyer and represented a state agency, I knew a little bit about how agencies operate, and that's a good thing because we're governed by several on the local, state, and federal level.
Cross them at your own peril.
Right.
Yep.
So that gave me a little more confidence in dealing with the regulatory issues and how to navigate those. And then, when issues like advocacy come up, whether it's on the craft beer side or the THC side, I felt better equipped to serve the industry with my knowledge and skills. And I've done so on several occasions. So those skills, even though my license isn't active anymore, I take those skills with me wherever I go, and they've been very, very helpful over the years.
I would imagine even like contract reviews and anything that a lawyer would normally touch, you can probably look at that pretty
exactly.
quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we still do have outside counsel for some of the bigger jobs, but I do a lot of contract review and negotiations and things like that. So it's very helpful.
Yeah, probably saved a few bucks.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And as a small business owner, that's always a good thing.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you alluded to it before, but any other, projects or initiatives at Bauhaus that you're particularly excited about?
Yes. So we are going to be launching our first line of functional beverages in Q2 is our target this year. These are going to be cocktail inspired. Not necessarily like an NA margarita or NA, gin and tonic.
Sure.
These will be elevated flavor profiles that are like notionally cocktails.
Yep.
But we wanted to create something that was different than what's out there right now. There's plenty of NA versions of, cocktails. And we thought, well, there's a lot of younger drinkers, or I shouldn't say drinkers, younger people who haven't even tasted alcohol.
Yeah.
So they don't have a frame of reference for what a gin and tonic even tastes like.
Right.
So why don't we create some really elevated, fun flavors with functional ingredients like adaptogens, nootropics, botanicals, things that will maybe make you feel a little bit of a buzz or anxiety relief or stress relief or energized in a delicious flavor profile. So that's what we're working on right now. We just got some initial designs back for the brand and the cans that we're going to be putting out.
Exciting.
I'm super excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How has the R&D been on that? I would imagine that's a fair amount of work. Or
it is.
Do you work with another company that kind of does some of that, or how did that?
Well, fortunately, because we have been willing to innovate and diversify, I would say starting with hard seltzer, but then NA beer and THC beverages.
And kombucha. You guys do kombucha?
We don't do kombucha.
Okay.
No, we serve kombucha in the tap room, but it's not ours.
Sure.
But we've been pretty good about learning new skill sets. And one of those skill sets is flavor development and recipe design in new beverage areas. And so we've got a fair amount of knowledge there that we can apply to this new beverage category. And we've also co-packed for brands that have took us out of our comfort zone and forced us to learn.
Right.
Which we like to do. It only adds to what we do if we can offer more services and produce more beverages.
Mm-hmm. So you have that in-house institutional knowledge that makes these sorts of initiatives a little bit easier.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And fun.
It's very fun. Yeah.
Do you get your hands dirty with that stuff still?
Not as much as I used to. I did a lot of the initial flavor profiles for our Bolo hard seltzer line. I still write a lot of the beer recipes, although even some of that has been taken off my plate by our very capable head brewer, Chris Squire, and our lab manager and flavor profile developer, Elaine Kappel. They've been great at helping with those projects.
Yeah, very cool. So what does your day-to-day kind of look like?
A lot of it is high-level strategy, brand positioning, business development, seeking new products, doing market research on perhaps new services or new beverage categories that we can look at, getting co-packing clients on board, streamlining operations, finding efficiencies, higher level stuff.
Yeah. Working on the business, not necessarily in the business. Yeah,
exactly.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about social media marketing, advertising. How involved are you with that, or just kind of give us the strategy on how Bauhaus goes about it?
Well, in the beginning, I was a very big part of it. My brothers and I, and my sister-in-law Maura, and my ex-wife Lydia, was very instrumental in shaping the tone of our brand and the social tone, the way that we reached our customers through some pretty innovative marketing campaigns. We did a lot of video work. Funny video work, and we're going to be doing a little bit more of that. Honestly, COVID kind of put a halt to that.
Right.
It was a very unfunny time.
Yeah, it wants to be funny during the global.
It was a very unfunny time. Yeah. So we're looking to recapture some of that with some new content that we're going to be putting out in the next few months, which is going to be great. I'm super excited about it. The team is excited about it. But these days, we just hired a new marketing person. Her name is Maeve Gimple. She's got some great experience, really innovative ideas. She's really helped step it up for us. We've also got a very awesome social media manager named Carrie O'Halloran, who does a great job at social, and she also does graphic design for us.
Nice.
But the cool thing about Bauhaus is that we've always believed that great ideas can come from anywhere. And we've always been very receptive to staff ideas for things. And, we'll try anything, as long as it's a fun idea and we think that it fits with the brand tone, we'll give it a shot. And so a lot of the ideas for our beer names or content has really come from, people within the organization.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's great leadership too, to empower your employees to feel like they have a voice at the table. I think is pretty important, right?
Yeah. And it turns out we have a lot of great creative thinkers in our company.
Yeah. How has staffing been for you guys the last couple of years? Because I know it's been challenging for other businesses.
Yeah, it's always a concern. But fortunately, we have had a relatively low rate of turnover. And the turnover that we have had, it's usually people leaving the industry and trying something new. But we still have some taproom staff who have been with us from day one.
Cool.
In 2014. And we haven't hired new taproom staff in 5 years. So that's
incredible.
That's been gratifying. It's been great.
Yeah.
And, we really do try to have a great organizational culture, a culture of trust, empowerment. And actually, I started doing leadership coaching and culture development for organizations a little over a year ago.
Oh, cool.
And I work with a consulting firm in town called Keystone Group International.
Mm-hmm.
The CEO and her business partner actually wrote a book that was #1 on Amazon last May called The Culture Climb.
Oh.
And so on behalf of the firm, I facilitate a series of roundtable discussions, peer-to-peer discussions on culture.
Yeah.
And what does great culture look like? What do conscious leaders look like? The ones who facilitate great cultures.
Yeah.
So that's been a really fun thing for me to do because, whether I had words to describe it or not, we've been doing a lot of those things at Bauhaus from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I really enjoy imparting, what I've learned and then also what the Culture Climb book talks about to other organizations to help them.
That's cool. And I would imagine too, I don't remember the saying exactly, but you can learn more by teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine you probably get a lot of that too.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I've learned a lot through those processes. And also just on the strategic foundation work that I do in coaching and consulting. Like we've been running Traction EOS at Bauhaus for about 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to take those tools along with...
We quickly explain what EOS is
for
folks? Yeah.
Sure. So it's Entrepreneurial Operating System is what it stands for. And just it's a way to organize a business so that you make sure you have the right people in the right seats heading towards a common vision. Everyone has goals that they know they're supposed to achieve, and they have help in achieving them. And it's just a foundational way to organize a business.
Yeah. And
build in accountabilities and make sure that everyone's on the same page.
It's like a framework. A lot of it's common sense, but it kind of formalizes stuff that people have been doing for a long time. But if you forget about it, it's a kind of a problem, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great framework, but it does have its limitations. There are only so many tools. And so what I like about the work I do with Keystone is that they've designed their suite of tools to sort of wrap around Traction and elevate it, which allows us to be a lot more nimble in solving unique issues for companies that maybe Traction can't address.
What a good place to start for folks. Would they read Traction and then go read Culture Climb? Would that be a pretty good education?
That'd be a great education, particularly because Traction does not address company culture. They don't have any modules for that.
Right. All right. Interesting. On that note, any advice to any aspiring entrepreneurs, whether they want to get into, brewing or just any challenging market in general?
Yes. Make sure you learn what KPIs are early.
And key performance indicators.
You're right. Key performance indicators. Keep an eye on cash flow as diligently as possible, because it's the #1 small business killer is lack of liquidity and not having a sense of what your cash flow is. I think, mental health is a huge topic these days in so many facets of life. And I think as a business owner, it's really important to be aware of your mental health status. It's been a real challenge for me. as someone who has faced some pretty dark bouts of anxiety and depression over the years, and the stress of keeping a business open, especially when you're in a highly competitive space, it can be pretty overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I accepted that I needed some help that things started to turn around, and I started a journey to better myself. So I would say if you're a business owner and you're wondering, like, should I be paying more attention to my mental health? The answer is always yes. And there's help out there. And it's not anything to be ashamed of, to seek it out. In fact, I love being vulnerable with other people in that realm, and I'm kind of an open book.
Right.
And I think that the more willing that people are to be vulnerable with each other, the better we all become by normalizing seeking help for mental health issues.
Totally. And it does feel like the stigma is kind of lifting around that too.
Yeah, I
People
see
are
that.
more willing to share and be vulnerable on that front. So I think that's a win for everybody, because then it gives you permission,
Yes.
You don't have to be the stoic, tough as nails,
Right.
I have everything in control, right?
Yeah.
'Cause nobody does.
Nobody does.
We're all hiding.
Right.
Just in some capacity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great.
And then seek out mentors. Don't be afraid to ask for help. No one needs to be an island as a business owner. And in fact, I think it's a detriment if you think of it that way. Everybody has help along the way. And the more that you're willing to seek it out and just kind of humble yourself in that regard, the better you're going to be.
Yeah. I beat that drum a lot here locally, even in the film and art scene too, that, people want to put their head down and just be, the person responsible for this thing and then present it to the world.
Yeah.
And they don't seek outside input as often as they should. And I think they're doing themselves a disservice, and maybe it's ego. I don't know what it is. But
I don't know if it's ego or if it's like, this is just my personal experience. I felt like I needed to do it alone in the beginning, or else I wasn't a bona fide business owner or something.
You didn't bleed enough.
Yeah.
It's
like, no, this is my responsibility alone. And if I have to ask for outside help, then I must be an imposter or something. It's like that's a completely backwards way to look at it. Like I said, nobody succeeds alone. If they do, it's extremely rare.
Yeah. And you'll still get credit for it if it's great. So
sure.
Yeah, don't pull those walls down and ask for help, ask for advice, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If somebody wanted to get in the brewing market today, would that be a good idea, or is it a little tricky?
I would probably make sure that they've got a business idea that is unique in a very crowded market before pulling that trigger. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot changing in the marketplace right now. Beer is not enjoying the market presence that it did 4 or 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. There was a big boom in the 2010s, and things are cooling down now.
Yeah.
And it's changing. So I don't know if it's a great time to get into craft beer. It's a great time to get into NA beverages, but you don't need to spend a bunch of capital on that. There's a lot of co-packers out there who can help you bring your idea to market without having a huge capex up front.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How are the food trucks doing? I know they're popular at the tap room, but do you know anything about like how that industry is doing? Because that's kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit too.
Yeah, I think that it's still fairly healthy from what I can tell. We have a great food truck partner in the spring and summer, Animales.
Love him.
John Whipley's operation. He's phenomenal at what he does, has great food. And we've got a handful of trucks that operate in the winter with us that are also awesome. I think it's always been a challenging business no matter what the market conditions. Yep. But, you still see them all over the place, and I see new ones all the time. So
yeah, well, I love it because, we get a whole new cornucopia of options.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think a lot of business owners who start food trucks are perhaps looking to do a market test with something on that level and then eventually get a brick and mortar.
Yeah, pretty brilliant. You don't need the CapEx to, to do the brick and mortar, and you get to test out.
Right, prove it out first if it has legs. Any
practical tools or technology that you use in your day-to-day life that you feel like more people should be using, or is kind of your secret weapon?
Well, I am a pretty voracious reader. I read a bunch of business books. I'm always trying to improve what I do or look at things from a different angle. So I think just becoming a great reader, an avid reader, is really helpful. It's a great tool. Networking, huge tool. I'm actually part of a peer leadership group called Coalition 9 that was started by a great guy named Aaron Eggert, and his entire reason for creating the group was to elevate business leaders 9 people at a time. And we kind of serve as each other's board of personal advisors. We meet once a month. We help network. We help people solve challenges they're dealing with. If you're in an industry where you're selling, having a great CRM is pretty important these days. It can streamline a lot of what you do.
And CRM is software to kind of maintain your customer database, essentially?
Right. To track sales, maintain your customer management, things like that. It's a lot more streamlined, and there's so many options these days than like using a pen and paper,
Yeah.
And then having some sort of foundational organizational framework, whether it's Traction or there's another one called Pinnacle, or what we do at Keystone. We have our own unique tools. But using some form of framework like that to organize the business, no matter what scale you are, I think even sole proprietors can use it to some degree.
For sure, yeah.
But having some framework so that you're doing consistent, repeatable processes and optimizing your business, that's only going to help you.
Yeah. Well, then you can track wins and losses, right? And you can compare them. And if you're not tracking, if you're not paying attention, you can't look at trends. You can't see where to go next. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. You've already, you've given a bunch of flowers already to some, staff and other local breweries. Any other local businesses, bands, restaurants, anything that you feel like needs a little bit more attention that you want to shout out?
I want to shout out Maragold NA Bottle Shop.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I am not. Educate me.
So the owner of Honey Salon in South Minneapolis, right next to Pat's Tap, started a non-alcoholic bottle shop called Maragold. And they've been a phenomenal partner for us with our NA beverages. We actually did a collaboration THC beverage with them.
I mean, what is a bottle shop? I don't even know.
Oh, like it's like a liquor store, but it's all NA drinks.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And they have another location in St. Paul now. There actually are 2 other NA bottle shops that are open in Minneapolis called Zero Proof.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, Minneapolis and St. Paul right now have the highest number of NA bottle shops per capita of anywhere in the country.
Huh.
But Aaron, the founder of Maragold, has just done something really cool over there. I love what they're doing. They've got a great social media presence. People are really excited about it. We're thrilled to be partners with them. As far as restaurants, it already gets a ton of love, but I was just at Colita the other night, one of Danny Del Prado's places, and it's phenomenal. It's so good.
Yeah. What was I was there last year. The dessert was a churro dessert.
That's what I had, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh wow, yeah. It was so good.
I felt bad telling our waiter that, like, I hate to say it, but that might have been the best part of the meal because it was so off the charts good.
Yeah. And then another restaurant that, just because it's a block away from my house, it doesn't need any more love. It's already gotten huge accolades, but Pizzeria Lola and Kim's Place in South Minneapolis is just phenomenal. I love it. And if I wasn't living on a budget, I would be there a lot more often.
Yeah, probably have to hit the gym a little more often.
Yeah, right.
Too. Yeah. She's probably a great person to look to, in terms of.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
So talented, and she's been a supporter of Bauhaus since we opened, and it's been great to partner with her and her restaurant group.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, if people wanted to, either, learn more about you or Bauhaus, like, where can they go online to?
They can look us up at Bauhaus Brew Labs on Instagram, Facebook, and then I'm on LinkedIn just personally, Matt Schwandt, SCHWANDT, and reach out. I'd love to chat.
Awesome. Well, this was amazing. Yeah, thanks for being here. I learned a lot and had a blast, and congrats on all this success.
Thanks a lot, Matt. I love being here.